since the mic echoed so badly that I couldn't catch it all. For those three people that don't know me, I'm Pete Vanderhoef, and this is supposed to be a kind of a slideshow of what I put together when I was in Vietnam in 1965. Kind of as a preamble for the whole thing, because it's kind of germane to the game. How many of you were in the service? Okay. How many of you were in the Air Force? And how many of you flew airplanes? Were you Navy? Were you F-4s? Okay, well, I can't remember something, I'm just going to make it up. At this age, how many of you read the book Joseph Heller's Catch-22? I see some hands up. For those few of you that didn't read it, I read it back when I was basically in high school. It was about a bomber squadron, North Africa, flew in Italy mostly, at the end of World War II, and the whole book was based about the futility of war. And we had a major in my squadron that told me that when he was flying F-86s in Korea, that somebody told him that his squadron was just like the book. And I got to thinking about it, and my squadron in Vietnam had every character the book had. And actually, the three main characters that I remember of the book, my little minder binder was a scrounger. And by the end of the book, both the Germans and the Americans were fighting the war for Milo's benefit. They had a guy that was a philosopher that was pretty much the heart and soul of the book, named Osarian. Well, we had our philosopher, and he was just like Osarian. They had another fellow in that book. His name was Major. His first name was Major. So he came in, he signed in the military as Major, and whoever signed him in assigned him the rank of Major. So all through the book, he was Major, totally incompetent. We had Major in our squadron too. And every other of the minor characters we had. I just wanted to say that to start with. Figure out this little beauty. That actually is me at the end of my career in Luke. And if I can find the proper things. The whole thing started out, whoops, wrong button, in training command. That happens to be D, and my parachute in front of a T-37 called the Tweed. That was a great little airplane. It had about the same characteristics as a Learjet. It was a high-lift wing, heavily acrobatic. We transitioned into the T-38. They're still using this. I flew this in '62. They're still using this in training. It's very sleek, very aerodynamic. It's kind of like the 37 was like driving a Volkswagen. And this was like driving a Lamborghini without brakes. When you try to do a joint up in the air, usually you can throw out your speed brakes, and if you're coming in too hot, you throw your gear down, and then you throw your flaps down, and hopefully you slow it down. That sucker wouldn't slow down for anything. You were just going by unless you did it right. But it was fun to fly. The thing that was interesting, right out of training command, I was sent up to Reno, Nevada, outside at Stead Air Force Base for survival training. And if you notice, we're kind of wearing heavy clothes. It was winter mountain survival on snowshoes to get us ready to go to Vietnam. Now this is my first clue that Catch-22 was going to show up in my career. We went from there. Learned the F-100, I'm sorry, yes, from the F-100, and then from there I went to Canada, Mexico, did one deployment to Japan and Korea on nuclear alert. kind of as in the side of it, sitting on a nuclear bomb when the Gulf of Tonkin hit, and we actually started the engines on the airplane. And that's scary. So we ended up in Clark Field. We were scrambled there. We basically called home and said, hello wife, pack my bags. We're scrambled. She says, where are you going? I said, I can't tell you. Well, it wasn't any secret. But this was Clark Field. We took 18 airplanes over there with 24 pilots and 350 support troops. That's about what it took to keep the squadron going. Officers Club, swimming pool, spent a lot of time there. For lack of anything better to do, we went to Angeles City, which was just outside the base. You can tell it's not a very modern city at the time. One of the things we bought is my roommate, Dale Strawberry. He's got a blowgun he bought there, and he had a target on the door, and he was putting darts in the door because he wasn't very accurate. From there, we flew our planes into Saigon and Tan Son Nhut Air Base. And this is actually very close to normal. In the Air Force, you fly over the end of the runway and then you start pitching out and circle down. And the whole idea of that maneuver is if you have an engine failure, you can still get it on the ground on a hard surface. And this just shows a pitch out, no big deal. Those are the airplanes. That, if I can find the button, there it is. That happens to be me in that particular airplane. And I'll tell you why I can tell later. That's what we landed on. This was the field. You notice every kind of airplane you can imagine is on that field. And I've been on a runway rolling out as one of 4 airplanes moving on the same runway. One guy was turning off, another guy was landing, another guy was taking off, and there was me at the end of it. We lived in a Fritz Villa, just outside the back gate, Tan Son Nhut. 14-foot ceilings, no screens on the windows. We had Vietnamese ladies brought their families. They kind of kept it clean for us and basically put things back to order. That was my bed, 2-door room, no big deal. This happens to be our flight surgeon trying to start his moped. His term for a moped was a crotch car. And it didn't start very often. And the back of the gentleman standing there was our commander, Colonel Comstock. And that was our monkey, and the monkey had work to do because we didn't have screens on our windows. The bugs would come in and just completely cover the ceiling. They looked like mayflies. And then the geckos would come in and eat the bugs. And then to get rid of the geckos on a long chain, one of the guys would bring our monkey in and he'd swing around on the ceiling and eat the geckos like popsicles. And then we'd chain him up again when he did it. Question.
I was interested that you tell your commander from the back.
How did what?
We were seeing the back of your commander, and I was curious how you knew that was him.
Oh, he was the only one that wore a wheel cap.
Yeah, but that's the fat hen.
Oh, listen, we knew who the commander was from any direction. Yeah. So anyway, so much for the monkey. We transported back and forth either in the back of a pickup or in what we call a bread wagon, a covered whatever, cargo, whatever. This is the back gate to Tan Son Nhut. Our villa was just a quarter mile down to the right, and about, I think 8 months after we left, the VC blew it up. So, this is the squadron. They found out that I could do things with a spray can, so I painted this thing. It says, "We were here, Tan Son Nhut, with an airplane dropping napalm in the front. This is our commander. This is me, and if you notice, whenever you take out the camera, you get saluted." These are the guys geared up to go out. There's a bunch of guys doing their homework. You notice the guy on the telephone, he's not calling home. In 1962, we didn't call home. He's talking to the weather station. This is our commander, and this is the way he liked to brief. Sitting on the table cross-legged. Now, there's one thing about the commander. We were real lucky. He was an ace in the Second World War. And he had the squadron back then. He was lieutenant colonel back in 1945, and he was still a lieutenant colonel in 1965. And he had been a commander of about a dozen squadrons. And in the Air Force, the prime job in the Air Force was being a squadron commander. I mean, that's where you did things, and you know, it was kind of like being the coach of a basketball team. It was the best you could get, except you got to play. One of the things that Colonel Comstock did for us, he put a lot of things in that he did back in World War II. And one of the things he did is he put our names, the pilots' names and the crew chiefs' names on the canopy rail. So kind of personalize who it was. And we flew our airplane as much as possible. I mean, if it was available to go, we flew it because we knew all the sounds and squeaks and actually in the States we had a 65% in-commission rate. And an in-commission rate means an airplane is ready to fly. So that was 35% were in the hangar trying to get fixed in the States. Over here at Johnson Newton, for 6 months, when I was there for 6 months, we had a 95% in-commission rate. We didn't write up Mickey Mouse things. If they weren't important, we knew it was no problem. We'd mention it to the crew chief, and I would say almost always the crew chief fixed it, but it would never have to get put in the hangar. If something big was wrong, yeah, it was written up if it was dangerous. But that was pretty good shooting. The crew chiefs were a major part of this thing. Another thing that Colonel Comstock did, he said, I want my logo that I had on my P-47 airplane in the Second World War, I want that painted on my airplane. So I painted it on the airplane. And if you notice, those are the 7 German kills. And the bombs that are painted on there, the crew chiefs put that on. Every time that airplane flew a mission, they painted another bomb on it. And you'll notice the various pictures throughout this thing have different numbers of bombs on. You can tell when I took the pictures. I did other airplanes. That happens to be my airplane. The reason I named it Pretty Penny was I was a junior officer in the squadron along with my roommate. And his wife was named Penny, and she was a very good-looking, dark-haired lady. And this happens to be a knockoff of what was on the joke page in the Playboy magazine. There's nothing original here. But this was the only airplane in the Air Force that had the logo on it. And those are on both sides. You'll look at it, sometimes they're facing backwards, sometimes they're facing forwards. I did this by putting masking tape on it, and I did all the painting with a spray can, no brushes, just to show you. I did the leprechaun for an Irishman named Paul Cohagen. This is his in color. I did the shadow that's off of Mad Magazine on a fellow named Shad Dvorak. And it's called sign all through the Air Force with shadow. That's me standing by there. I'm wearing glasses so you don't recognize me. Now I show this because the various ordnance we carried on our plane. There really were 2 different air wars. In the South, we were pretty much troop support. When the Army or the Marines got in trouble, they'd call in air support to bail them out. Or we assisted them on a particular target or whatever. Other than that, it was kind of targets of opportunity. We never dropped unless we had a forward air controller. And those guys were flying little Piper Cubs, essentially. And they had a radio they could talk to the ground troops. They had a radio they could talk to us, but we couldn't talk to the ground troops. radios going. But the kind of ordnance we carried normally, on the inboard pylon, that's a 750-pound bomb. This is a gas tank. We always carried 2 of those because we didn't have that long gun. Didn't have that kind of range without it. And in front, before they put the fins on it, that's cannon napalm. Back here is a rocket pod, 19 2.75-inch rockets that we normally carried on the outboard pylons. We basically carried just 4 weapons under us. The F4 and the 105 could fly north with 4 times that. And their air war essentially was, you go in, you hit the target, and you get the heck out of there. Our air war, we make 6 passes. 1 pass, 2 outboard stations go off, whether they're your rocket napalm or whatever. And then we could individually drop the bombs on the 2 inboard pylons, and then we go back and strafe for 3 different passes. And when we strafe, we use 20 millimeter guns. We have 4 guns underneath the nose of it, and they had the same rate of fire as the Gatling guns did on the 105s and on the later F4s. So we would usually, this whole panel underneath is just a layout of machine gun shells, essentially. And with every 3rd one, we'd have one that was just a ball ammunition, one was armor piercing, and one was high explosive. And probably one of our favorite things for troop support, believe it or not, whoops, wrong button, was the CBU. And this little feller was full of hand grenades. We had one on each outboard pylon, and they said if we had an area, if we had a level area about 10,000 feet long by maybe 300 to 400 feet wide, and we pickled all the way down it, and dropped all of it on almost a level pass, it had about a 95% kill average. If there was a person standing up or laying down, they were in trouble because the grenades were full of essentially buckshot. This is going out the airplane. This guy's name is Ed the Moon. If you notice, he's saluting the camera too. When he went back to the States, he went out and he was the 2nd black pilot for Pan Am. And when Pan Am was merged into United, that's where he went, and he ended up retiring from United Airlines. I still trade Christmas cards with Ed. That's yours truly getting ready to go up. Got a 750 on the inboard pylon. Crew chiefs get things ready. This group on the left is a group coming in, and the group on the right are going out to the arming area to fly their mission. I showed this as, actually there's a plane in the arming area on the far left, our plane. The Army flew the same, essentially Piper Cubs that the forward air controllers flew. I had a picture, I didn't get a chance to dig it out, but before we left there, all of the forward air controllers, when they fly back into Saigon, they put the green triangle that was on our tail, the Comstock had this green triangle right there. They put that on their Piper Cubs too. Taxiing out, getting ready to go, and there's a cargo plane. I said, I've got to wait for the war here. I show this because at 5,000 feet and 400 knots, you can't see much on the ground. So you really need the spotters to tell you where things are. And I was unlucky enough to have to carry a camera pod under the airplane. It slows it down because I was a junior. And I also flew a lot of camera ships. I'm on the wing of this plane that's delivering the rockets right now, and he's got the 750 on the inboard stations. And that's actually Here's one thing that F4s didn't do. You ever do a level rocket pass?
No.
We were under an overcast. In fact, you can almost see the little mountain getting blotted out on the peak. So we were level on this thing. So little Kentucky windage, we fired the rockets off, and you can see the smoke that the forward air controller put down. You can also see a missile here and a missile there. They sometimes didn't go where you wanted them to. And there was probably some farmer on the other side of the hill that had a surprise that day. This is just another picture from the center pylon camera, and it shows the rockets moving in. Of course, it was a bullseye, I wouldn't have shown it to you. We're back flying into Saigon here. After a flight, usually we were over the target at sunrise. That was usually the first flight. And the second flight, after they turned these guys around, would go out in the afternoon. We had already eaten breakfast at the Officers Club, and we're now back eating breakfast for lunch. And there's our flight surgeon trying to get his crossbar started. And the most intent supervisor was our Gusarian. He was our philosopher. And you can tell he had something serious to tell the flight surgeon. So I painted him a picture, and that's a duck. It's in a quack. And it says, the dispensary, Dr. Gil Henderson, faith healer and physician, a graduate of Slippery Rock State Teachers College of Veterinary Medicine, and I don't know what the other two are. I could read them, but it's immaterial. I mean, that's how serious we were. And there he is, flight surgeon on the left, one of the guys on the right. Tillman ended up being a full colonel and 27 years. Had a good career. Got a haircut once a week, and one week I came in and these guys were different. I said, what happened to them? And I was told that, oh, they took them out back and shot them because they were VCs. Okay. We always kept an alert pad going. Usually just two of us were there because the top two would always bang their heads trying to get out. And we just rotated around who was on for that night. If somebody got in trouble at night, then we'd go out and we'd have to drop under flares, which is a real joy. This is taxiing out. This is what it looks like in the rain. You can't see Sikkim. You can see, I've clipped my strike map on there. And actually, on this combining glass, there's basically dots of light. That's your aiming point. And the equipment that we had was equal to what World War II had. We didn't have any computer-aided anything. Basically, I call them iron sights. So you had to figure your own Kentucky windage in. You basically, like on a dive bomb, is a 45-degree angle down at a specific speed. They said 400 knots, and you were to release the bombs at, I don't remember specifically, something like 3,000 or 4,000 feet above the ground, whatever that was. I tried to look it up, I didn't find it quick enough. And if anything was different, if you're going faster, or if your angle wasn't the same, or your airspeed was different, the bomb wasn't going to go where you would have the target on it. So you had to adjust kind of in your mind. It's kind of like shooting a basketball. For some reason, you could be anywhere in the court and the ball would still go in if you're any good. And we got pretty good adjusting for everything. And trust me, we didn't deliver our ordnance at any 400 knots. We put it on the wall and took what we got. One of the things our commander did also, the way they did it in the last year of World War II, when they turned the fighters loose to hit targets of opportunity, they always had, when they flew a fighter forward, they'd fly a high circle and they'd peel in, but they always had the second man nose toward the target. when the first man's bombs went off. Now, you didn't want to get too close or it would go off and you'd be a part of it. But that change was straight from that change with napalm and the like. And basically, we lost 6 airplanes over there, but we recovered 4 of the pilots, so that was pretty good. Tansanute, Emperor Rain. This is an A1. The South Vietnamese Air Force flew the A1s. And it's an excellent air-to-ground airplane. Flew a lot of those in Korea. It's a very big airplane, really. And it carried a huge bomb load, but it's very slow. And in the hot target, they didn't do very well. And a picture of their ramp. Those are all South Vietnamese. We kept trying. The Army snuck a fixed-wing airplane in here right at the end, but the Air Force didn't want the Army to have any fixed-wing anything. They wanted all their wings to move as in helicopters, which the Army said, okay, we can do that. And I don't even know what that thing's called. It was kind of weird. Now, I showed this picture because this middle airplane right here is an F-8 Crusader. And the F-8 Crusader uses exactly the same engine as the F-100. It uses exactly the same gauges as the F-100. And almost the entire infrastructure outside of the outside skin was exactly the same as the F-100. Well, this particular one was brought in to Saigon because they didn't want it to return to the ship because it had a problem. So they figured they'd bring it here, fix it up, fly it to Japan, fix it if they could. Well, the night that after he came here, our crew chiefs descended upon it and took everything that was the same in our airplane out of it and put everything we had that didn't work back into it. It was still there about 3 months later. I think it may still be there, I don't know. But that was guaranteed it was not going to fly again. And the Navy with some A6s, they brought some troops into Saigon, probably go down to MacV in downtown Saigon. Another A6 picture. And this airplane was, what would you call it? Radar and it did all kinds of things but shoot guns and drop bombs. It was kind of like our eye in the sky. A Canberra. We flew some Canberras over there. We all the time been trying to find a jet to give the South Vietnamese Air Force. I mean, they were decent pilots, but they had old equipment and they wanted modern equipment. So what they did here was they took these Canberras and they painted them with Vietnamese, South Vietnamese markings. And they took all kinds of pictures, and the next day they painted them back to American ones. But, you know, another one of the things they did during the war. Now, you might remember the name of General Nguyen Cao Ky. After the CIA and the South Vietnamese decided to do away with the president of South Vietnam, they killed him. This guy took over, and he was the president of South Vietnam, but he was still flying combat missions in his A-1. And about 6 months after we left, he said, I don't want to be president anymore, just let me be a pilot. And that's what he became. And he got out at the end of the war, came to the States, and retired nicely in California. There's Yossarian again. Sometimes when we weren't scheduled, we'd play basketball, which was kind of fun. And we have an R&R. I was supposed to go to Hong Kong, but some airman drove a forklift into the bay door of Admiral Sharp's airplane. And it couldn't fly, and I didn't want to wait until the next available, so the next plane out was to Bangkok, so I took it. That had to be the Golden Buddha. That was the shiny one, not me. And there I am with Sprotberry again, and Johnny's Gems. Everybody had to buy a candlestick holder. You may have seen these things. They were everybody bought one of those dumb things. And I brought home two, we made lamps out of them. and we did a clong tour. And a clong is a canal. And they were all through Bangkok. And Dee and I went back to Bangkok here, 10 years later, or 10 years ago. And they drained all the clogs and they put 6-lane highways over where they were. I mean, it's just a big city with lots of traffic. But you can see the long, I can't remember what they call that long tail outboard motor. The clogs are very shallow. They couldn't use a straight down outboard that we're used to. And that's the guy at the snake farm, cobras, wandering around. They don't have old people doing that, I noticed. Temple rubbing. I actually brought home 6 temple rubbings. You paid $1 for the guy to do it. And it wasn't long before the government said you can't do that anymore because they were rubbing off the detail off the stone work. So many temple rubbings. Came down one time and there was a whole bunch of commotion on one of the hangars, so I wandered over and lo and behold, Hello Dolly is playing here with the Broadway cast. Carol Channing is there. Now you notice the people in flight suits here and in the work gear are in the back. These are all guys from that really are, let's say, non-combatants. They got all the good seats, which makes sense. But we didn't care. We enjoyed it. Another picture flying out. This is a picture halfway to Da Nang. And I actually had a camera. I was taking slides, and the color ones are slides. It took me a heck of a time to get those changed over. And this is literally rolling in for a napalm pass. You're literally sitting square in your chair, looking up like that. And that's a little farther in the roll in. You see the target that's already on fire. And this is what was left of the target. And that's yours truly at a massive 145 pounds. I went over at 190 and I came home at 145. And a lot of times when we had the early flight, we would change into civilian clothes and ride kind of a motorized pedicab downtown Saigon. And these are some pictures from the front of the pedicab. And that's a gal wearing, we call that an aldi. It's kind of like the dress outfit for them. The tractors, American tractors don't work real well in rice paddies. So they use them to haul trailers. And this is more pictures of a lot of people riding mopeds and bicycles, etc. This little fellow didn't have a problem with diapers. And he liked my hat, so I took his picture, and then he was nice enough to give me my hat back. And this is on the Street of Flowers, a really high class, I mean very expensive stuff in this thing. Street of Flowers is the main spot. There's a workman with a block plane on a piece of board. We call that a butt vice. But it works. Now I took this because there's an Oliver tractor for sale. And I wish that was in color, but that's a blue tractor. Oh, I gotta go back. If you notice, you can buy anything on the street that you would find in the PX, because that's where it got to before it got to the PX. It's kind of like the black market over there. We very often go to the top of the Rex Hotel, which the military had taken over as kind of a club type thing. It wasn't an officers club or an airman's club or a non-counts club, it was just a club. And these are some of the guys sitting up there. And we've all flown a mission that morning. These guys thought they were going to go swimming until they saw all the algae that was in the pool. And the reason we were up there was this was a cook your own steak deal. You could get about a 20-ounce T-bone and a baked potato for $1. And we went there fairly often, really. And this is me. This particular picture is, I'll say it's famous in a way. And why I say it's famous was, this is a model magazine for the F-100. And I made the centerfold on a model magazine with that airplane with the markings. And on the second page, that exact picture is in that book, and it's in every other book going. Now, after we left there, they camouflaged it, repainted all the airplanes, because they thought that it would be harder to see if they were camouflaged like a jungle on top of a ramp, which didn't make any sense to me. This is one of our casualties. Our flight surgeon is helping bring him out of the helicopter that picked him up. He bailed out, messed up his back on the bailout because the Martin Baker seat was pretty severe if he didn't get squared away before you punched out. And Charlie Summers didn't get squared away. There's Charlie in the stretcher, Doc on the left, and there's Charlie on the stretcher in the ambulance, and he was going back to the States. He's okay. He finished up a 25-year career in the Air Force after this. We got to be real good friends with the guys in that were flying the Army Hueys. And actually, we went flying with them. Now, this picture was taken 1 week after our commander told us he'd court-martialed anyone he caught flying with the guys in the Hueys. Well, the night that this picture was taken, I had 7 night weather combat missions in that Huey. And the first 3, I had a 30 caliber machine gun in my lap. It was dark as heck. I'd never seen this 30 caliber machine gun in my lap before. It was a belt-fed machine gun. I didn't even know where the safety was. And if we'd ever had any action, maybe I could have thrown it at him. I couldn't have shot it. But the last 3 rides on that thing, I was on the stick, and they let me fly it, which is, it's different flying a helicopter, but it makes sense if you got a good guy telling you how to do it. So anyway, I couldn't log it in my flight log. I really wanted to, because I didn't want the commander to see it. These are the Hueys on the ramp. These are random pictures, and if you look at the rockets coming off there, they're going every which way. And that's them homing in. This picture was another camera pod shot, literally. The target on this is right there. And the next, those are my napalm, put it right on the target. And that's, actually, this was a Michelin rubber plantation. We just wanted to help the French along. This shows what it looks like when B-52s are dropping their 750-pound bombs in the jungle. This is what it looks like after they get done. Now, a 750-pound bomb, if it was to hit a house in Iowa City, there wouldn't be anything left of the house, and the neighbors' trees and houses would probably be blown down too. It's a big bang. And the bullseye for the B-52s was 2,500 feet. They're used to dropping nuclear weapons, and they weren't any more accurate with 750-pound bombs. Now, our bullseye was pretty much 25 feet. And we pretty much hit that, the whole squadron did. If you do it every day, you get pretty good at it. The only hole I ever got in my airplane, that was a 50 caliber got me. And somebody else got one too. One of the guns barrels exploded. One of the 2 guns on this side exploded and blew the door that was in that hole, and it impaled itself on the inboard pylon, which changes the flight characteristics of the airplane just a little bit. And there's a picture from the side. And this fellow, Joe Reness, was almost catatonic at stage. I was on his wing the day before that when he bailed out. So he thought he was going to have to go 2 days in a row jumping out. He wasn't sure. But it was no problem. Brought back, out the door, everything flew. This is a picture of the barrier at the end of the runway. And it's kind of, we learned this from the Navy. You know, if you don't have any brakes to stop with. Now, if your hydraulics go up, there's a little propeller that falls out of the airplane. It's called a wrap. And it'll keep enough oil pressure in there so you still have flight controls. But when that little propeller stops going around, you're on the runway. You don't have any nose wheel steering. You don't have any brakes. You can't do differential braking. So the best thing you can do is to drop the tail hook. And our tail hook was really sophisticated. A piece of strap iron about 8 foot long, about a ½ inch deep, and about 4 inches wide with a hook on the end of it. But it worked. Oh, and also, right here was that camera pod I was telling you about. Took pictures fore and aft. These are some random shots. I think this is probably a straight pass. He followed somebody else in. And that's a napalm pass, just random. That's the Scotia Tiger. That was another attempt to give the South Vietnamese a jet airplane. You remember the T-38 I was telling you about? The Lamborghini? They made that into a single-seat fighter. Very short wings, very fast. Did I say that thing goes brake release to 30,000 or 40,000 in 3 minutes? As far as time. Time to climb on that thing is 33,000 feet per minute. Time to climb on the T-37 was 3,300 feet per minute. And the F-100 is more like 21,000 feet per minute when it's clean, but I never flew one clean. And I was the camera ship on their first flight on this thing. And that's their big, massive napalm pass. And the napalm they carried was half of what we carried, I mean, half the size. It was kind of like a toy. That airplane is tremendous, air to air. It's not worth a peanut, air to ground. Some of you might know one or both of these guys. Jim Deegan is Dee's first cousin, and he's the one that introduced me to Dee, and we still talk. And he spent 2 years up on the DMZ flying Huey helicopters, gunships. And he met Chuk, who for the longest time worked at First National Bank as a teller. She also does bamboo painting, watercolor painting, very talented. She's French educated. She's got a long story, I won't go into that now. But she was a beautiful gal. I think she's all like 18 years old here. This is Chuk, myself, Jim, and Chuk's mother. And that's, her mother has had 9 children at this time. And this is walking down from the restaurant at the Continental Hotel with Jim and Chuk. She's wearing the Alday. And Chuk and one of her sisters. And Jim was putting Chuk on an airplane to Saigon. That's what they were doing there. To go back to the States to live with Jim's parents. And if there was ever a woman that Dee was terrified of, it's her Aunt Margaret, which is Jim's mother. And we knew Chuk was going to really enjoy that, living with him for a month or two before Jim returned. And the airplane was late. And this is us getting ready to go home. And we went home on a C-130, and they said, well, we don't have any air conditioning or heat. Would you like to wait for 2 days before you leave? The answer was no. Maybe doesn't know what those things. Whatever. If you want to be entertained, watch those things come in for a landing. I mean, they crash, they don't land. But they fly amazingly well. And when I got home, the 2-year-old son was waiting. Now, one of the virtues of taking a lot of pictures, which I did as a kind of a hobby, is you get things like models. And I showed you this modeling thing with my airplane in it. This particular model, the decals have my airplane decals in it, including my name. A Brit wrote a very definitive book on the F-100s. And I have a lot of my pictures that you've just seen in there. And another magazine has more pictures in it. This happens to be, I have this model at home, I didn't bring it with me. It's a metal model, very accurate, of the commander's plane with the commander's logo on the nose. And the ultimate model was a flying radio controlled F-100, my airplane with Pretty Penny on the front. And that's a little better picture of it. That airplane's top speed, that model airplane, is 250 miles an hour. And he says he's afraid to open it up because he may never see it again. And that's the end of it. Do you have any questions or whatever?
So how often would you fly? Would you fly 6 days a week?
There are some weeks we flew every day. There were some weeks we flew 2 missions in a day. It depended on what was going on. We had probably the hottest mission we had was Play Me. It was the first time the North Vietnamese came down. It was kind of like a Dien Bien Phu game. And I was scrambled at night. And when we came over the target, a whole bowl around this triangular fort that had special forces in it was lit up like Christmas trees. I mean, just white blinking lights. And each blink was a gun going off. And I mean, there were thousands of them, and they were shooting at that deal down there. And we actually put the CBUs, which are nasty as heck, on the outer wire of that triangular fort. And that helped a lot. And we came back with napalm and cleaned up some. And when we flew in there, 2 of the A-1s that the Americans were flying had already been there and were shot down already. A 3rd one, the guy bailed out about 10 miles away, and the 4th one went back to Da Nang, which was a ways back. It was a really hot target. I got back, we debriefed, I went back again, and I had to take a correspondent with me, and that's a whole different story. That's where I got my hold of my airplane. I was on a straight pass, and I yield like this. I actually wasn't a straight, it was a napalm pass. I was coming in, I had my target picked out, and the guy in the back seat who was just a visiting fireman, a correspondent, actually his name was Threlkeld, gave me full right rudder. He was stretching. I was just about ready to pickle. And I mean, when you put full right rudder in that airplane, you're going sideways. And I looked down, straight down at the quad 50 that was all lit up. All 4 barrels were white, blinking at me, which means he was shooting behind me, thank goodness. So I broke the guy's leg when I returned the pedal where it belonged. Came back around, and the guy got both my cans of napalm. So, but anyway, that was the hottest mission, and that was the mission I got hit on.
Did you ever fly for a carrier? Off of a carrier?
Say it again.
Did you ever fly off a carrier?
Oh no, they tried to fly that airplane off the carrier. The stall speed on that airplane was essentially 50 knots. The struts on it are about as stiff as a telephone pole, and the tires carried 600 pounds of pressure. They broke the deck on the carrier they tried to land on. And
Hey, Pete,
they also said that, yeah,
picture you when you were in training. How old were you? You look like 14 years old.
I was 22.
Wow.
Well, you should have seen, well, you did see me. She looked like she was 12. We had a hard time getting a drink. Yeah,
You went in as a second lieutenant,
correct.
and you came out as the first.
Came out as a captain.
Well, I thought I saw a silver bar on your uniform when you were with your 3-year-old son.
No,
So that's.
no, I was wearing tracks. The first picture you saw up there, what everybody did with it. I had my tracks on. I'll back up. You can't see them.
That's a captain's.
Okay, so how
Well,
long?
maybe that one was after I came back from, I bet you that's when I came back from, Japan and Korea.
Okay, what was your progression? You were 18 months as a brown bar, and then you went to silver for.
I put on the tracks at 3.5 years.
Okay.
They were running out of captains,
Yeah.
so we got it early.
Did you ever have to bail out?
No, thank you. No, we were very comfortable flying in, yes, sir.
What was your commission source?
My commission?
Yeah. Where'd you get your?
Oh, I went to ROTC in Iowa, and the, most of the classes in Iowa, they show, well, Bruce was in them, Victory at Sea pictures, which makes a lot of sense. Like everything makes a lot of sense. But, yeah, we went through ROTC and we got our private license with 34 hours in a Piper Colt. Then we went to the 3738. Yeah. Good? Yes. Paul?
Can you talk about the relationships you made in that time of your life, and how they lasted?
Oh, what?
The relationships you made with people
Oh.
you served with, and how that affected
Well,
your life?
if you can imagine a fraternity house, think of John Belushi. That was really what the squadron looked like. I mean, if he would ask a question, you would get so many snarky comments you couldn't believe. Until it was a serious problem, then you'd be told the right thing. But it was a lot of fun with the guys, because we're all basically the same age, all in the same boat. And actually, the commander was kind of one of us. I mean, we very much revered him. I mean, he really knew he actually lost a son when we were there, flying F-4s up north. So, yeah.
Did you ever consider flying commercial pilots?
I did. I got my commercial license while I was in the service, and we talked about it. I had 5 opportunities for jobs when I got out. And, you know, like I tell people that my dad went into the bookstore business because he was considering in college whether he was going to go to work at the college bookstore or for a Ford dealership, and he said he lost the flip. No, I mean, we thought about it. We actually thought about staying in, but most of the guys had 3 tours, minimum. You know, they stay home for a year and then go back over. And you do it often enough, they're going to get you.
Yeah.
I did copy down some statistics on the various airplanes that were flying there. It kind of gives you a feeling for what was going on. If I can get my eyes out again. The F-100 lost 188 planes to combat, and non-combat losses were 45. I mean, the plane quit flying on them or something. The O-1, the spotter planes, lost 426 in combat and 50 in non-combat. The Hueys, the helicopters, lost 3,254 in combat. And the F-4s, this is both Air Force and Navy and Marines, lost 533 and 156 to non-combat. So it kind of gives you a feel. The 105 lost 330 combat. So we were flying not as a critical mission. I mean, a lot of our missions weren't hot. We were shot at a lot, but when you get really hot ones, they're really hot. And most of the shoot downs, other than the missiles up north, were from ground fire, which is what we flew in a lot. But we survived it.
Very good.
Any more?
What was your last year in ROTC?
What was my last year, what?
In ROTC?
Oh, I graduated in '62.
Yeah.
Well, weren't you in that class?
Yeah. I was actually in 61.
Oh. Okay. Well, you came back and got your log degree. Okay. Well, it was really enjoyable with the guys we were with. And it was kind of interesting. The two guys we lost were both Academy graduates. And the Academy, I think I read, lost only 11 pilots in Vietnam. And they were chunking out pilots right and left. Now, I could be wrong on that last, but I know that the only two guys we lost were Academy grads.
I did have one last question. Your commander was a lieutenant colonel,
Yes.
and he was in a long time, and he retired as lieutenant colonel.
Well, at the end of the Second World War, he had his own squadron, so he was in charge. And they had this big party at the end celebrating before they all went home. And it seemed that the base commander and the wing commander came down to visit this party, and they were met by a female swinging on the chandeliers that ended up hitting the base commander with their legs on both sides of his ears. And because the commander was in charge of the party, he didn't make rank for a long time.